So Lucy fans, just whilst I have your attention in this intro, this review, just like what I kind of said about my Part A review, which is around a year ago now, that was far too long, but this is catered for those of you who don't even want to watch a non-spoiler review. So yes, here we are finally talking about Lucifer Season 5 Part 2, no spoilers. What is up, Lucy fans? Welcome to a brand new Lucifer video, and it feels so good to finally say I can talk about Lucifer Season 5 Part 2, albeit that this is a non-spoiler review, and as I said, when I say no spoilers, I mean no spoilers. And it's kind of weird that I couldn't release this review earlier, like I could last year. Netflix, for some reason, didn't want us talking about anything, even no spoilers, until this day of release. So I'm guessing that they were really paranoid about someone slipping up about something, because as you can imagine, with God coming this season, and this originally meaning to be the final season, or the closing season of the series, there's a lot of things that happen, let's just say that. Now, as for my spoiler review, expect it, if not today, over the coming days, just because I want to give a chance for everyone to watch it. The episodes in this, there's 8 of them, as we expected, but they're an hour long, some of them, so I don't expect everybody, with lots of you being busy people, I'm sure, to binge through it all at once. So if you're wondering about my spoiler thoughts, do not worry, they are coming. And lastly, this video will just kind of give you a good idea of what to expect from this season with my thoughts without giving anything away. What does the season feel like knowing it was meant to be its last? And does it pave a decent pathway forward for the actual final season, Season 6? I guess we're going to start with premising this season and where did we leave off at the end of last season. That is, of course, with time freezing. The frickin' angels, Amenadiel, Lucifer, Maze was involved, Michael were fighting, and then God appeared. So I think it's no surprise, especially if you've seen the trailer, which I trust you have if you're a Lucy fan, that God is here on Earth. And that really opens up many interesting doors this season. Honestly, I think that's very self-explanatory, but if you can't get it through my energy right now, my God, it's actually mad. It really is. And I've spoke about this before, I think even in my non-spoiler review for Part A. When shows reach divinity level things, and I know that's funny because we're already dealing with the devil and Amenadiel, but I guess like peak divinity, the Silver City kind of stuff with God, with things like that usually being out of reach, and things that they tease throughout the seasons here and there with God being mentioned and whatnot, you never feel like we're quite gonna get there, or if we did, it's gonna be like, oh my God, and it's finally here. And what that entails for the episodes that unfold afterwards is so much goodness, and I really mean that. If you're a Lucy fan, and like you are a Lucy fan, you're gonna eat this up. Now, I say that for a few reasons. So God in of himself, like, I feel like introducing God in a show which centers around the angel that got cast out of heaven, self-explanatory, but him being involved sets up and just guarantees an insanely juicy season, to the point of where I feel like the showrunners have the story kind of write itself. It's like a guaranteed good time. With that kind of rich material, this season really does write itself, with the opportunities that, if you're familiar with this show, which I trust all of you are, that literally writes its own pages, with the amount of stuff you can imagine, with Lucifer interacting with God, Chloe, some other characters. It's truly something special. And that is because a lot of emphasis is put on God being on Earth a bit, of course, because he is now on Earth, which I'm sure you'll be happy to know as well. It's not a quick one and done, and that's not a spoiler to say that. Like, I want to reassure you, if you're watching this before going into it, it's not like God appears like he did when we got that cliffhanger and now he's just gone in the first episode. He sticks around. He's very felt throughout the whole of the next 8 episodes that you're about to watch. And the good thing about it as well is that it doesn't get old. One thing that I think people or shows or anything, when they're tackling something that's been very so carefully just behind the curtains like God has this whole time, his presence has kind of been felt, especially when dealing with a story centered around the devil and angels, you don't want to mess it up, and you don't want it to go down the drain, and you need to be, it's a lot of pressure, honestly, to write that, especially when uniting God with the angel he cast out for the rebellion. You know, that's a lot of pressure. But I'm very happy to say the moments that are provided are not only like really interesting to watch as of the first episode, but they get more and more fascinating as the episodes unfold. As for Dennis Haysbert, what more can I say other than he really is enjoying his role? I want to say more, but I just can't. And the only thing I will say about God, without giving anything away, of course, one thing I mentioned before with Lucifer is, you know, there's questions that are still left to the audience, sometimes maybe perceived as a plot hole or something, or maybe we didn't get the answer for that. I'm happy to say that we do get answers for things that may have frustrated some fans before when talking about certain things. I need to navigate this very carefully. But the thing that I wanted to get onto, the point is, with God and his mysterious ways, I feel like they leaned, and this isn't to rain on the parade, I'm just giving a very honest, you know, non-spoiler review here. I feel like they lean on God and his mysterious ways, and are you omnipresent or aren't you omnipresent? And it just kind of leaves it there. That we don't sometimes get much clarity beyond that. And that is a very relevant reason, because God has been referred to, oh, he has his mysterious ways and stuff. But I feel like to lean on that as much as what I feel like this season did with some of the questions, it leaned on it a bit too heavy at times, to the point of where it felt like it was plot armor. But then there are things that happen that make you wonder if what you're going to see is actually all a part of God's plan. So it's an interesting thing that they play with there. But to put it simply, I was still left after many developments wondering, okay, was this a part of God's plan? Did God know this all along? Was this what was going on, or was that? It's, I wouldn't call it frustrating. It's just, I think they're really utilizing that character with how they can really escape a certain situation that fans wanted answers for, or, you know, I guess it's almost open to interpretation, and I think do with that as you will. Some people might be still frustrated by that, but some people might be like, oh, and that's all a part of the fun, if that makes sense. Now, what about Michael? Because I feel like I have to talk about him towards the beginning, since he was such a large, you know, part of 5A. Well, the thing about Michael is he's still such a fascinating character. He's not as involved, but the few and far between moments is probably how I could best describe it, make him arguably just as, if not more important than before. Now, I'm being very careful to only stick to, like, very briefly talking about what the trailer very specifically shows us when handling anything to do with spoilers in this non-spoiler review. So let me just raise the most obvious takeaway thing that a lot of people took out of the trailer, and that is when Lucifer says, I'm going to be God. Now, that teaser the trailer gave us here adds a very interesting thing to deal with throughout Season 5 Part 2. Obviously, that's a massive thing to throw into the mix, especially when you take into account that not only do we have the main man here, dear old dad himself, but we also have Michael and his unknown endgame. That was never obviously brought to full fruition, and the audience doesn't know what the heck was really going on with that as of the end of Part 1 of Season 5, so we still got that flowing around. And obviously there's a whole heaven and angels that might be interested in that debate, and a certain brother who might have something to say about that. But on top of all of this, what I'm very happy to say is, and something I didn't actually expect so much, is that this season still pulls big surprises. Really big surprises. And I mean, big surprises. Now, how do the episodes feel, like, with these, you know, an extra 8 episodes we've got, with the pacing and whatnot? Well, I suppose I would start this by saying that the episodes do still feel insanely well-paced to me, and that is still very, very refreshing and just as engaging as ever. And I think that's not only due to what I've teased a little bit with so much rich material in of itself with just the concept of this season, as I boasted about God being involved. It's just like a season that writes itself. You know, what is really Michael's endgame plan? How does that affect Lucifer and Chloe with God being here now? Is Lucifer going to be God? What will that mean for Lucifer and Chloe? It's just all very, very interesting stuff, with episodes sometimes also going over 1 hour in length. And what I'm trying to articulate there is that, honestly, there's not a dull moment in sight, which is what I, you know, really happily say is a massive charm of the Lucifer show in general. Mainly, though, when it went over to Netflix. Because that's what I kind of call the magic of Lucifer, if you will. It's kind of what the audience is invested in, and that is these characters. So when we're that invested in them, that the content that we have to watch unfold this season is just so compelling, and the moments episodes sometimes leave off on, it just most certainly makes you want to continue. And once again, I'm so happy that this is on Netflix now, compared to the formulaic approach that network TV takes sometimes with 23 to 26 episodes. This is kind of reiterating what I've said before, but when it went to Netflix, shorter episodes. I know some people think more is great, but I think more is less when it comes to TV like this, because it propels each episode to be filled with main plot. There's not as much fillery stuff, and even though we've got more episodes this season, obviously with it being divided into 2 parts, the story is heavily dosed main plot stuff in each and every episode. Now, I want to mention a couple of episodes, just for example's sake, one to look out for, and just, I guess, another to give an example of how every episode in this season is very interesting. Because I know not everyone, for example, is a massive musical lover, and, you know, that's hard to believe when, you know, we're talking about the audience of Lucifer, especially with the amazing talent of Tom Ellis and others who can sing on there. This season is quite interesting, does take its time to have some breathing fun, albeit of what I just spoke about, every episode being main plot focused. It takes a breath of fresh air sometimes in between all of what it needs to try and accomplish. So we have that musical episode, I believe Bloody Celestial Karaoke Jam, but even though it's a musical episode, it doesn't actually ditch important story that still needs to be addressed. So look for the path of the main story still being heavily tread in every single episode, and there is that episode is really good, especially towards the ending of it. But one of my favorite episodes is truly Daniel Espinosa naked and alone. That episode, man, I love Kevin Alejandro. He's absolutely fantastic. And of course, I need to have a little Dexter kind of situation going on here, and kind of going off the bat of talking about Chloe and Lucifer just a few minutes ago. Chloe and Lucifer, well, I don't want to, and I can't say too much, but it's what you would expect with a certain majority of it, obviously, because, you know, we're over the kind of reconciling with the fact that my boyfriend is the devil and whatnot. That was very, you know, in the past now. It's now stepping into the territory of navigating their relationship in the wake of God himself being on Earth, and having also a very diabolical brother still very much so in the mix. We can't forget about that. It's almost like Lucifer and Chloe can't really get a clean run. Plus, Lucifer also has to come to terms with those very 3 important words. That's a big story beat that you can't forget about, that you've all already seen. If your ear is to the ground in terms of what the showrunners have been saying, none of this is spoilers, but a part of Lucifer's journey this season, and the Dexter kind of journey, is him, you know, trying to, you can't, as they say, you can't love someone else until you love yourself kind of thing. It's kind of that, and that journey is very interesting to watch unfold, and it isn't tedious. I do want to reassure you there. It's not like, oh, like, we all know Lucifer loves Chloe, but, like, he just isn't saying it. It is a very relevant journey that happens and what unfolds, and it's carefully curated. Ultimately, the journey these 2 characters go on, amongst all of the new and very interesting things thrown into the mix, I would still call fantastic, at least in my experience, and ultimately very, very wholesome. There are also tears, happiness, you name it, it's all in there. The writers and showrunners definitely know what Lucy fans like when it comes to Chloe and Lucifer. So rest assured there, if you haven't watched it yet and you're watching this. Now, the LAPD kind of case of the week storyline, you know, it's typical and what you would expect. I would say this time round, just as many funny moments as what we've had before. They're very predictable though, and it feels almost more predictable this time round. Maybe I just need to do a rewatch, but it felt like the cases, you know, they are sometimes meant to be obviously mysterious. That's a part of the cop procedural mystery of this show. But because this time I feel like the cases heavily, more so than ever before, reflect a heavy thematic thematic parallel, if you will, to what is going on in the main story. And as I said, that's been done before, but this time they've kind of doubled down on the parallels that Lucifer can kind of draw out of these cases. And I do want to really emphasize, that's not a bad thing, by the way. It's kind of what I would like to call kind of typical popcorn stuff of the Lucifer series, and that we would get from Lucifer in general, where the show doesn't really take itself too seriously, which is why I can really get on board with this, and I, for example, don't tear apart plot holes and whatnot, because Lucifer, more so than any other kind of drama comedy show, if you will, doesn't take itself seriously at points. It's more sitcom-y in that way. It's like, you don't watch a sitcom to be like, well, that's actually not a reflection of how it would be in real life, because it almost gets meta at points. Do you know what I mean? And this show does that as well in the most charming way, in where it actually blends two of the most great things that make a perfect cocktail, things that I love Doom Patrol for and other shows, is that it's comedy blended with drama that gives you the kind of ability to laugh your ass off, but also by the end of the same episode be in tears. But as usual, Lucifer doesn't pour all of its effort into the case stuff. It's much more so concentrated on and focused in the main plot stuff. The case stuff is the case stuff. Now, before this season coming out, actors teased heartbreak, and obviously this was meant to be the final season. So, what does that feel like now for me, having watched this, knowing that was what it was originally going to be? This was going to be the series ending season, or half season, if you will. And that's really crazy to just contemplate right now, just because this season for me very still much so felt as though it wasn't penning up to be over anytime soon. And I really mean that. Like, as I was watching this, I was like, okay, this was meant to be the final season if you take both halves into account. And this doesn't feel like it's going to end anywhere, which is very, very interesting. Throughout the season, there are plenty of teary kind of moments, just enough to make you tear up, but also shed a tear. I am completely and wholeheartedly admitting I'm guilty of both in the best kind of way. It made me sad. It made me cry tears of joy. I wasn't like, but there were times where I was like, oh my God. And it hits you in the best kind of way. And a lot of that I put down to the incredible cast. Like, honestly, of course, these moments I speak of wouldn't be that impactful on me if it wasn't for a long-standing narrative to this story for these characters coming to a peak point, for example. But it is also down to the cast and their incredible acting. For example, some moments that Lucifer shares with God are just absolute scene stealers. And that can be said for many moments with many other characters, also completely unrelated to God. But as I said, the cocktail of this half of the season 5 is that the very material they have in of itself is so compelling. If you watch my Lucifer content regularly, you may know that I said in my trailer breakdown that the character I was kind of most looking forward to this season once again was Daniel Espinosa, Kevin Alejandro. I think he's a phenomenal actor. The character always makes me laugh. And honestly, I feel like not only is he the audience vessel that we kind of all realize anyway, because he's the human dealing with the celestial stuff last season and kind of just, yeah, reconciling with the fact that he's worked with the devil. Imagine now that God's here. Yeah, and don't forget, who did Dan used to be in a relationship with? Yeah, just imagine what you've got in store this season with Detective Douche. As I say, he's just hilarious. Kevin Alejandro just kills it. And he was honestly one of the highlights of this season for me. And he just gets some really, really great moments. I don't know how much more to sing his praises. I didn't think once upon a time, like, Detective Douche would be arguably kind of, other than Lucifer himself and whatnot, my favorite character, but I think I can say he is. Other stuff that you'll be happy to know about, and this isn't spoilery, but like, for example, Trixie, she is in it a lot more this season, which is great. I was very happy to see that, and it's not just like she isn't thrown in there to appease fans, for example. They made her moments extremely relevant, and yeah, it was just great seeing Trixie more rather than just like pretending to shut a door and being like, night night, baby, or something like that. It's like, no, Trixie's here. Now, Linda this season is thrown in a few areas. She's still very much so her therapist self, but of course she gets very interesting material. I mean, in of itself, with this premise, she is in the divine family now. Think about it. She is with Amenadiel, so that technically makes her a part of God's family, as teased in the trailer. That brings some very, 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 very interesting moments. Some of my favorite moments, just like, for example, Detective Douche, is the human perspective of all of this. And Linda is absolutely hilarious, but it's also great to see that there's also this personal journey for her that we've seen before that just basically kind of gets further fleshed out in wholesome ways, and that's all I'm going to say about that. As for Ella, she's kind of, we can't forget that, you know, this picks up right off the bat of the last season, so she's kind of still dealing with the darkness that kind of led her to be attracted to the bad guys, that serial killer, as of the end of last season, and her journey that we see unfold this season is somewhat a self-improving journey and kind of learning to accept herself. It's a bit of like a echoed beat of what we've seen before, but it's not done in a dull way. It just kind of, it's like something that just gets built upon and built upon and built upon, and obviously with God being injected, that only makes things more interesting. And it also still feels far from over with Ella, which leads me to say this. There are some things with certain characters that I kind of thought I would see happen, and maybe you could call this expectations, but it kind of adds into the whole, this was meant to be the final season. So there's certain things with certain characters that I thought would happen, or I wanted to happen, but as I've said, it never felt like this show was going to end anytime soon. So it feels like we're getting a season 5 part 3 rather than a season 6, if that makes sense. That's the only way I can kind of explain it, and this leads me to talk about the finale. So I'm on to my final bullet point now, and I wrote down here saying the finale, I'm very happy to say, because this is something that I was expressing a little bit of concern about. When it comes to this, obviously, having meant to have ended this season, there was a finale rewrite, and I thought, well, what are they going to do to propel it for another potential 8 to 10 episodes? I think it's 10 off the top of my head, can't remember right now. The first thing I want to say is you can definitely see how this is going to continue. I'm very, 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 very happy to report that back, and I have ideas of how it could have ended, since, as I said, that was the original plan before it was rewritten. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. There's still a lot of story left to tell as of the very, very, very final scene that we see in the 16th episode, which is one of the most fascinating things for me to kind of look back in retrospect, because I've been covering this for quite a while. And it just leaves you with this comforting feeling that there is actually a lot going for the show still, heading into season 6, that you can also see the close coming. Because going off of this season, as I said, it didn't feel like it was ending. It would have felt almost too rushed to end it. I'm sure that's meant to be the approach when you're taking into account a rewrite, and now that you've got another season. Bottom line, the material that, and the plan and the narrative that you can see moving forward, there is plenty of material that they can do in season 6, but it's nice because they're teeing up it coming to a close now. And that's nice. It's like, okay, I can see the content that we've got coming, but I can also see the end in sight. And it's like nice. It feels like they are nicely adjusting it to end at a perfect time for fans, if that makes sense. At least that's what I'm taking out of it, especially with the ending. The setup most certainly does feel like something to go out on. The only criticism I have, and this is just, I feel like a consequence of what did happen with the fact that they got another season, the finale does feel a little bit, teeny bit rushed. Just with the sheer amount of things that happen in that episode. I really, really am dying to see what the showrunners maybe one day say about how that was going to originally end in this finale. And when I say rushed, it's not the most awful thing in the world at all. It doesn't distract from all the enjoyment you're getting out of the episode. It's just a lot is packed into that final episode. But I still very thoroughly enjoyed it. Didn't really mark down the season too much at all for me, really. I mean, I love this show, so that was an easy thing for me to overlook. And I would love to know your opinions on that when you get to the finale episode. But yeah, that is overall my review. I can't say too much more without getting into spoiler details. So it just feels great to obviously have Lucifer back. It feels great being reassured that season 6 looks like it's got a good story to it and it's not being milked. I can 100% promise you that. It doesn't feel like it's being milked or like rinsed. that is one thing you can definitely take out of this review. And I know for a fact that Lucy fans are going to love this. I think I actually do very much so prefer this half a season over the first half. I did enjoy the first half, don't get me wrong. I really did. But this, I think, as I keep reiterating, the material is just so compelling with God being involved and other little things that it really does lead to probably the most exciting things that this show could do in its whole run, to the point of where they could make a decision and carry on like some of the shows out there that go on for season 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And I'm not knocking those shows. I'm also a fan, but as we all know, if we're being realistic, sometimes that does squeeze the juice a little bit too much out of something. They're going out in a nice, carefully curated way, and maybe it's, you know, kind of the thing of it's better to burn bright than to kind of fade out, or whatever the saying goes with a candle. Let me know your thoughts. If you have watched it, you haven't watched it, let me know if you have, either way. And also, I'd love for you to let me know if you got to this part of the video by saying, along with whatever comment you're putting in the comment section, hashtag Dear Old Dad is here, like the video, subscribe for more Lucifer videos just like this. Of course, we're going to have a lot of coverage in the future, going to season 6 speculations, of course, my upcoming spoiler review, and as always, links are in the top pinned comment to my Twitter, all good places like that. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Lucy fans in the next video. Goodbye.